key numbers so that you can tighten the looseness. Really? Yeah. I'll show you that. It was like a $20 sharpener. It's not that hard. But it's got all. I'm like, I can go on that. Cool. Yeah, I got it. Oh, I'm sparing everybody. It's actually not coughing right now because I'm coughing. Right. So, but I thought everybody would. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start. Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. It's just after 10 o'clock, and it is time for both the last Sunday in August and the last chapter in the book of Ecclesiastes. So we are in chapter 12, and we're going to go all the way from verse 1 until the end, 14. There's only 14 verses for us to cover. And so, as I said in the beginning, you really need to read the whole book, and you especially need to make sure you read it till the end, because even the ending is going to be very real in the sense of describing life. Is that not working? Okay. And describing life, what to expect. And as part of this, we also see what is normal. It's no different now than it was several thousand years ago. So now we have in verse 1. Now remember all of the things that we've seen that are futile. There are all these activities that we do, work, all of these things are futile because they don't last. So the one recurring theme is that your relationship with God is not futile. It is what is going to last past this life that we have. It's the only thing you bring with you to the next life, and it's the only thing of value. Your relationship with God determines your future, either with or without God. So in verse 1, it says, so remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Now that in capturing how the ending is a piece of advice for everyone, especially younger people, because you should have a relationship with God in your youth, and that relationship will carry you all the days of your life. And that's what it's saying. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Now we have two that we're going to look at right off. Before the days of adversity come and your years approach, when you will say, I have no delight in them. So as you grow older, adversity is part of life. And sometimes the adversity grows. Right now, it is pretty adverse in our society and life. We see wars, we see economic problems. We all know about COVID. We see economic downturns. There's all of these things that are an adversity that we're experiencing. And you also see the quote at the end that when the years approach, when you will say, I have no delight in them. So that doesn't apply to everybody, but it does apply to some who, when they get old, their life is filled with physical problems, financial problems, family problems. And so with these problems, they say, I have no delight in them. The old years are not better than the young years. In verse 2, before the sun and the light are darkened, and the moon and the stars, and the clouds return after the rain. So normally when we have a rain, we'll start from the back of the sentence and go backwards. We hope that after a storm, we see the clouds break up and we see the light return. And with that, you have a promise of a new day. And we know that the storm is past, that storm we just went through is over. And here we see the clouds return after the rain. So there's a small break, but immediately the clouds return. The storm isn't over. It was only a pause or a momentary break, and now it's going to continue. And we see the sun and the light are darkened, and the moon and the stars. So, with a, a bad time in life, with the bad events going on, it does feel like the days are worse. There is no bright day where we start the morning and we look outside and we're so happy that we see all of the bright outside. It just remains dull. The same way with when you go out at night, instead of going out and enjoying the stars or a full moon, everything in life seems darkened. It seems worse. Now, there's a lot of this worse that we're going to go over on verse starting at 3. And now we have these winds, and you're going to see several of them. So here's we talk about on the day when the guardians of the house tremble and the strong men stoop. So normally the guardians of the house, if you had a large manor or a large estate, you would have servants, and then you would also have these other servants that protected, that were there to keep you safe. So if you have the guardians of the house trembling, and they're the strong people that you hire, how much worse is it for the people in the house? And then you see strong men stoop. So that's something that we see with age. Older men and women, as they age, they start to stoop over. They become frail. Next, we have the women who grind grain cease, because now we're going to have several reasons, because they are few. So we don't have many women grinding grain. Now, grain was very important. Grain was used for bread. It was a staple of life. So if you have few women doing it, you're making less, either because there's less grain to grind or there's less women to grind the grain. Then we have, and the one who watch through the windows see dimly. So that's another problem with age. Your sight starts to go. And so when you look, then you don't see as well. You don't see with clarity. The doors at the street are shut while the sound of the mill fades. Now, doors on the street being shut, either they're residences, which if they're shut, it's telling you, we don't want visitors. Or if it's a business saying we're not open. And the sound of the mill fades, that goes back to those women grinding grain. And grain being a staple of life, if you travel through a town and no one is grinding grain, then they're not going to have bread to sell. They're not going to have the staple of life that you need. When one rises at the sound of a bird, and all the daughters of song grow faint. Now, normally during prosperous times, and prosperous times meaning that we have produce, we have the right weather, we have the right amount of rain. The secondary effect of that, the primary effect, is that the people are able to eat. The secondary is wildlife is able to flourish and prosper, and they're able to get the grain that they need to live. So here, when one rises at the sound of a bird, that's saying hearing a bird is an unusual sound. where have all the birds gone? If you're rising up because you hear a bird, then that is an unusual sound that causes you to look. And all the daughters of song grow faint. So those are times that are sad. If we don't have the young people, the young daughters singing songs, then it is definitely a sad time. In verse 5, also, now we're seeing all of these really sad aspects of life of both growing old and also of just bad times. So now also they are afraid of heights and dangers on the road. So dangers on the road speak of uh, not only people that might attack us, but the dangers of afraid of heights and dangers on the road also speaks of frailty. When you're young, you don't mind going up on a ladder because if you fall, you're probably going to get bruised and that's about it. But as you grow old, if you go up on a ladder and you expose yourself to a height, you could fall and break something and die of the break or be crippled for the remainder of your life. So that's another aspect of growing old. The almond tree blossoms. Now, this is an, a poetic way to say white hair because almond trees turn white. And so here we're going to describe a person in these terms. So the first part is the almond tree blossoms, which is as you grow old, you get gray hair, or you may even get white hair, but your hair normally changes color. And it says the grasshopper loses its spring. So when you see grasshoppers, they're always leaping. They fly, they jump, they leap, they do all of these things that are filled with energy. So as an older person, that's describing you as a grasshopper who loses its spring. You're no longer filled with energy. Next, we have the caperberry has no effect. So in the Middle Eastern culture and in Jewish culture, the caperberry was both used for appetite and sexual desire, not desire, sexual drive. And so it's talking here about a loss of both appetite and sexual desire that comes with age. And next, after that, we see 4, the mere mortal is headed to his eternal home, and mourners will walk around the street. So we are the mere mortal, and our eternal home is not here on earth. And so as we see all of this aging that it's talking about, all of life changing, all of the things that we did in our youth are now gone, then each one of these points us to our death. And that is the mere mortal is headed for his eternal home, and mourners will walk around the street. The mourners happen after your death. So we see we're headed for death, and when death occurs, the mourners will be here, but we will not. In verse 6, before the silver cord is snapped and the golden bowl is broken. So these 2 items would be a silver cord would be something you would wear of value, and if a jeweler makes a silver necklace, then not only is the silver valuable, but the workmanship is valuable. And so if you break that silver cord, it's not as valuable because you can't wear it anymore. You broke it. It has to be repaired, or it has to be melted down and shaped into a necklace. So that silver cord is snapped and the golden bowl is broken. The golden bowl would be something of great value in your home. And so, if you have a really nice bowl of any type, if you dent it or break it, it's damaged. And so it no longer is serving its purpose. Now, the next one says, and the jar is shattered at the spring, and the will is broken into the well. So what that's talking about is at a well, you need two things to get water. One, you need some sort of vessel or a jar that you can lower into the well and then have it pulled up. And that way you can now drink from the vessel that got the water out of the well. The other aspect is if that vessel is big, then you need mechanical leverage, which usually is a wheel. And so that wheel would enable you to pull the vessel through the center of the well so that you're not breaking it on the sides. So it would have a support system um, on each side of the well, a cross member, and then you would have that wheel that allows you to lower the vessel into the well and pull it straight up without it clanking and breaking on the sides. So what use is a well if you can't get the water from it? Nothing, because if you have nothing to hold the water or to draw it up, then that well is useless to you. And in verse 7, the dust returns to the earth as it once was. Now, when we start in Genesis, we see man was created out of dust, out of the earth. And with that, upon our death, we return to the earth. The body, the physical body we have, will immediately decay. And that body will break down and return to the earth. Then we see, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. And so the earthly body that we have doesn't last. And it becomes very apparent as you grow old that this body is not going to make it. It is getting worse every year. So when this body goes away, then the spirit will go back to God. It's the spirit returns to God who gave it. And so that's where throughout the book, it talks about a relationship and what is important in life. Your relationship with God. Do you have one through Christ or do you not have one? Because in the end, when you die and this body goes away, your soul is what is going to go into eternity, and where you go is based on the relationship you chose to have. So in 8, absolute futility, says the teacher, everything is futile. So here we're ending with a statement about everything we've talked about. The above is what you have to look forward to. A dimming vision, gray hair, fear of getting hurt, maybe bad economic times. All of these things are what the future holds for everyone. And so that relationship that you had with God in your youth and you developed your entire adulthood is now what will carry you through these times until death. And now in verse 9, in addition to the teacher being a wise man, he constantly taught the people knowledge. He weighed, explored, and arranged many proverbs. So this book here is a complete book on a topic where when we go to Proverbs, we see Proverbs touches many topics. So we're giving some background about who the teacher is and what he did. It says the teacher sought to find delightful sayings and write words of truth accurately. Now, when you look at Ecclesiastes, I don't really see anything that was delightful sayings. We find those in Proverbs, but Ecclesiastes is the adult version of Proverbs. This deals with an opportunity to look at life and ask yourself, am I really doing what's important? And are these other things that important since I know they're going to pass away? And so that's the second half. And write words of truth accurately. So we've all had people who told us a truth that we needed to hear. And we may not have liked hearing it at the time, but it was still the truth. And we still needed to hear the truth. Because if you don't hear the truth and you are told by friends and family and whoever else what you want to hear, you're not going to make the choices you should make because no one's telling you the truth and confronting you. So the truth should always confront us. And the truth should make us decide, am I making decisions based on the truth? Or am I making decisions based on the way I wish it was, or the way I think it is, or the way I want it to be? Because if you're not making decisions based on the truth, then in the end, we may be surprised that we made bad decisions. And those bad decisions can have a horrible consequence. In verse 11, the sayings of the wise are like cattle prods. So what we have here is a picture of cows are very large animals, and they weigh a lot more than a person. They're very big. And so how can you get an animal that you can't reason with to go where you want it to go? Well, you can use a cattle prod, and you can force the animal to go in the direction you want. So here we see that this truth that we're receiving should work like a cattle prod. These words that are right here on paper that are in the Bible, they should work like a cattle prod. It should be a truth that confronts us, and then that truth motivates us to move or take action in the right direction. And so the sayings of the wise are like cattle prods, and those from masters of collections are like firmly embedded nails. Now, if you're building something and you're using nails, you use nails to keep boards from moving. You arrange the board how you want it, and you nail it in place, and it should prevent it from moving. So here, this knowledge that we're getting, we should be building a framework, and that framework is a relationship with God. And so if you're using the nails and these proverbs and this wisdom as both a cattle prod to motivate you to do this, and nails so that when you build your relationship, it's firmly set. It doesn't shift, it doesn't collapse. They're firmly in there, and that's where they're like firmly embedded nails. The sayings are given by one shepherd. So what we're hearing here is the value of this news. And even though the news isn't cheerful, or you're like, wow, this is really some news that it's hard to accept. But the reality is, if you're reading it from your youth, you're getting a glimpse of the future reality of your old age. If you're reading it in your old age, then you truly see these are some of the things that are a problem that you have now. And so the truth of it is you need to see it and act wisely on it. Now we're at verse 12. But beyond these, my son, be warned. Now we have another warning. Be warned. There is no end to the making of many books, and much study wearies the body. So, you can go to a library, a bookstore, you can look at online books. There is a never-ending supply of books. And if you go to books that talk about how to make your life better, how to feel better, how to adapt, how to set yourself in a way that you can live in the world, how you live with others, endless. It is an endless supply of them because everyone that writes has an idea of how to solve these problems. And the warning is much study wearies the body. So the answer is in one book, the Bible. It is not in all of the books that are being published. And that's where much study wearies the body, because if you look at other books, you will find conflicting ideas between all the authors and against and compared to the Bible. It will conflict. It will tell you, one person will say this is what you need to do. Someone else will say, no, you should do this. So if you're looking for truth in what you should do, then you should be looking at the Bible. It says, when all has been heard, the conclusion of the matter is this. Now we're at the very end. This is the conclusion. When all of the facts are heard, when all has been reviewed, when we've considered all the things that can be considered, the conclusion of the matter is this. Fear God. And so if you have an awe and reverence for God, that is the start of wisdom. And it says that throughout the Bible. And so if you have an awe and a fear of God, then you will live your life according to what God says. And that's the second part. And keep his commands. So because this is for all humanity. Now I underlined all humanity. Now remember, this was written in the Old Testament. And yet we see Solomon saying that a fear of God and awe and reverence of God and keeping God's commandments. He didn't say because it's for all Jews. He didn't say it was for the Hebrews. He didn't say it's only for those who follow God. Everyone else can do what they want. No, he says because it is for all humanity. And Jesus in John 14:15 says, if you love me, you will keep my commands. And so here we have it in the Old Testament about a fearing God. If you have awe, if you have respect, if you follow God, keep his commands. And then Jesus, like I said in John 14:15, also says, for if you love me, you will keep my commands. Now this is the closing in 14. And this is something for everyone, for all humanity. For God will bring every act to judgment, including every hidden thing, whether good or evil. So we said your relationship with God will define eternity. The relationship you choose to have while you're alive will define and permanently set your relationship with God in the future. If you have salvation through Christ and forgiveness of sin, then that every act that God will look at, whether good or evil, whether hidden or in the open, what happens at that point will be determined because of your relationship through Jesus. If you've already been forgiven, then you will be welcomed into heaven because your debt has been paid, your sins were forgiven, and you are in a right standing with God. If you find yourself before God outside of a relationship with Christ, without forgiveness of sin, without salvation, then you too will have every act judged, including everything that was good and evil, except you have no way to pay the debt except eternal damnation. You won't be forgiven. You will find yourself at judgment, and instead of Christ paying your debt and providing salvation and forgiveness of sin, you will have to pay your own debt. And that debt is an eternity in hell without God. So all of those things that we saw, all of the frailty, the graying hair, all of these problems, almost everyone shares all of them in life. And in death, you can have a choice. And that choice is, what relationship did I have with God in life? Because that relationship is how eternity is shaped for you, where you will spend eternity. And then that's where we start. When all has been heard, that means when we consider everything, the conclusion of the matter is this: fear God and keep his commands, because this is for all humanity. So we read the entire book on the futility of all the things that are happening. Work never goes away. We work our whole lives, and then our children begin working. And it's been thousands of years, and you've yet to run out of work. So all of these actions, when they're viewed from an eternal aspect, they're futile. They have no lasting value. The only thing that has lasting value is the relationship you choose to have with God. So I ask you, now that we're at the end, this is the time to think about, what relationship do I have with God? When I stand before judgment, will I find myself with my sins forgiven because I trusted in Christ? I have salvation, I have forgiveness of sin? Or will I stand at judgment to discover all my life was futile? I did not fear God, I did not keep his commandments, and now I will spend eternity in hell. So I'll go ahead and close us in prayer. God, thank you that with such clarity we see life. We see a book that tells us about the problems we'll have when we grow old, about frailty, about our vision dimming, the days growing gray, and they won't be the same as the sunshine-filled days of our youth. And we have an option to choose a relationship with you, to correct the bad relationship we have because of sin, and find ourselves in a new relationship through Christ. And as we read the book, we see man and women will eventually die. Everyone dies. So with that, since that is the nature of life, then we have to choose our relationships, and we have to choose to follow God while we live. Because after life, that choice won't be available. God, I ask that everyone look at your life and decide, am I following God? Are my priorities right? And if it's not, that they will seek out another Christian to talk to and ask, how can I set my life right? In Jesus' name, amen. in sounds so correct. How about, I liked it when it said like post or something.
Yeah.